Okay, so my name is Gittel Francis. I work at Jewish Family Service of Houston. We are a wraparound agency based in like the Meyerland area in Houston. A lot of what I primarily do is suicide prevention, which is mental health first aid instructors. Since the pandemic happened, the national model that we were following for our suicide prevention wasn't able to be seen or done on Zoom yet. They're working on it. It's supposed to come out next week, hopefully. So I sort of pivoted my role into doing more community trainings with mental health. Jewish Family Service provides behavioral and mental health counseling. One of the new departments that was kind of introduced was about a year and a half ago. We did something called community interventions. And I know that a lot of people are familiar with that, not during times of emergency, but when things are a little more calmer, sometimes they get that way. We go out to the community and we do trainings with mental health literacy and suicide prevention as a way that to have more people literate with mental health, the signs and symptoms, and also that people know what our services are and where to go to seek help. So since COVID-19 happened, I've been in my office over here, my makeshift office in my garage at home, and I've been doing a lot of self-care trainings. Another thing we do is we do disability services. We have case management. We are a United Way agency, and therefore we have a catchment area of people that we serve, senior case management, disaster case management, and also financial aid case management. We do career and employment services, and we have a very large internship program, as well as Holocaust services and legislative affairs. So we kind of like to look at ourselves as like a wraparound service where we serve the needs of many individuals and one individual if they have more needs than just one. So I know that self-care sometimes can be like a buzzword. Another thing that I know is that all of you are so busy working, and even the fact that you took time to come to this session is really remarkable. But at the same time, I want to ask you that if somebody came over to you, let's say at the beginning of March, and somebody asked you like, there's going to be something new that's going to happen. Do you have the capacity to learn anything new right now? And I would say probably a lot of us would say, no, I don't. Yet here we are, 3-4 months later, and we've all adapted to Zoom, and we've all been able to work from our home as we could, or get back into the offices when we had to, in order to be able to, to maintain our productivity. But we did learn something new. We all learned a lot for this pandemic. We're not going to kind of let this pandemic go to waste. So I know that self-care is probably something that you've heard about before. And I know that when I'm very busy, like one of the things that I think about is like, I've got like 99 problems and self-care isn't one of them. Yet I kind of want to ask you these two questions before we start, so that we kind of get an awareness of like sort of like centering where we are. So am I open to new directions or exploration? Like we have been in the past open to new directions. Our normal of the way that we were doing things is very, very different than the way it is right now. And also, did we succeed in surprising myself? So today, for this self-care workshop, I kind of want to ask you if you're open to new directions and, experiential learning. And then also, let's see if we could succeed in surprising ourselves. I love cartoons, sorry, and I'm a big New Yorker fan, and there's so many cartoons in it. I'm actually originally from New York. So it kind of makes me feel a little closer to home. I think that this is also the beginning of March, the people that were never in the mood of human interaction. I happen to be an extrovert, so I'm generally in the mood of interaction, but once in a while we get onto this line, and how different we are right now, and how much more we're craving the interaction and the meaningful relationships with people. So I just kind of wanted to show this sort of like where we were, where we are right now. Okay. Very common, more common is to hear about statistics that are negative about mental health, like what contributes to poor mental health. If I want to know if I have signs or symptoms of anxiety, or if I have signs or symptoms of depression, you could just look it up and you'll get like thousands of millions of Google hits on what makes me have poor mental health. Very little is known, not as much as known, is what makes people have better mental health or good mental health. And I've put down 6 identifiers that help people have a better or a more robust mental health. And they're personal, professional development, having positive relationships, having the ability to identify, understand, and regulate emotions. So we're able to look at them, point them out and understand them, and then, most importantly, to regulate them. Healthy communication, respectful communication, be accountable and take responsibilities, and set practical and realistic goals. So I was just thinking that if you have a problem with somebody that you work with, or if you're having a problem with at home, and it's not such a positive relationship, that is going to have an impact on your mental health. So, tending to those relationships, tending to yourself, setting yourself practical goals, all have ways of giving yourself more mental health. So it's very easy to point out and say the reasons why I don't have mental health, but there are also ways that you could make your mental health stronger and more robust. And these are the 6 identifiers. I'm going to share this slideshow with Jennifer after this, and she can share it with you as well, so you guys could, further learn and, kind of review it if you'd like. Also, there's a question and answer afterwards. So this is Hebrew, and if anyone can read it, that's awesome. One of the tenets of the Torah, of the Old Testament, is to love your fellow as you love yourself. It's paramount to anything else. There's a story that a rabbi was approached and by somebody that wasn't Jewish, and he said, "I want to learn your whole Torah. I want to do it on one foot." And the rabbi answered him, "Yes, you have to love somebody as you love yourself." I know that many of you are caretakers, and many of you that's your job. I kind of want to introduce you to the concept of that in order to love somebody else, you have to love yourself. In order to pour from another cup, I've heard blessings of like, they should have a cup overflowing of blessings. Why overflowing? Because if you don't have enough liquid in your cup, how can you give it to somebody else? How can we be bucket fillers when we ourselves, our buckets are empty? So it's not necessarily about loving somebody else as much as you love yourself. It's also about loving yourself in order to be able to love yourself, giving yourself self-care in order to be able to care for others. Some common signs of distress. I want you to look at it as a physical and psychological and behavioral. So some of the physical symptoms could be headaches or body aches, unexplained skin rashes, worsening chronic health problems. Some of the behavioral signs of distress is anger or short-tempered. I think that many people say, anger or short-temper sounds very typically that means somebody's in distress. But people don't realize that if they have an unexplained skin rash or stomach ache, or they can't sleep at night, it's because they also have common signs of distress. And then there's the psychological, psychological signs of distress would be like having difficulty thoughts, feeling sad, angry, anxiety, and numbness. Those are some of the psychological signs of distress. So if you have a coworker that came to you and said to you, I have this feeling in my stomach that I can't get rid of, it could mean that they have a sign of distress. Or if you yourself have, a difficulty sleeping, it could mean that you have signs of distress. So I kind of feel like, we live in a world of like emojis and graphics. And I kind of put this in because I think it really, really explains it. How are you feeling today? What are some of your common signs of distress? Are they physical? Are they psychological? Or are they behavioral? Okay, so I'd like you to look at signs of distress as a continuum. Okay, so you can go from mild signs of distress, moderate signs of distress, severe, very severe, and incapacitating. And identifying what your stress is important in order for you to know how to cope with your stress, right? So your stress could be general stressors. And I feel that many times our jobs are stressful enough as it is, and then something happens like a pandemic or social injustice, and it just accumulates more and more and more. So the general stressor would be that generally I feel overloaded with my job, or I generally feel that I have a lot going on. And then there's the specific stressors that add to it. So overload is too much to do, too many, pressure, too many demands. And then the specific stressors are, my personal issue. I'm having a manager that's not, I know it doesn't happen to any one of you, but that's not so understanding. I'm having an unrealistic workload. The easiest thing to do is to go to unhealthy coping strategies. It's probably better if we have healthy coping strategies, and some of the healthy coping strategies of the stress is physical activity. Is if you have a buildup of something inside of you, you want to release it. So you can release it through physical activity. So going for a walk, gardening, jogging, going for a run, whatever it is, making yourself healthy food, making sure that you get enough time, enough sleep, relaxation and meditation, making time for fun, doing something that you wouldn't ordinarily do. And also one of the things of one of the healthy coping strategies is self-care. Self-care can encompass meditation and physical activity, and we're going to go through self-care more in depth. That's, you know, kind of the point of it. The other thing that I want to highlight is as follows, is I want you to look at things as a continuum. How often am I feeling a certain way? If you're feeling stressed out always, then that could be a problem. Does your stress limit you? Is it very severe? Or is it that you're just feeling sometimes? And when I sometimes feel a certain way, I'm going to choose this healthy coping strategy in order for me to get by. I feel like the word sometimes is very, very important for mental health in general and for psychology. Like, so I get angry and I yell and scream, or that was a negative coping mechanism. But it doesn't mean that I'm always angry. And it doesn't mean that my anger is very severe or incapacitating. It just means that sometimes I get angry. And then the question of where sometimes ends up being like, when do you seek help? How do I know when I have to go get professional help? And the answer is, if your feelings or emotions, if you're stressed and the feelings of emotions of your stress affect your ability, and I'm talking on the bottom of the screen, if it affects your ability to work, to carry out daily activities, and to engage in meaningful relationships. So I'll give you an example, something from my own personal life. I live with anxiety. I have a lot of anxious feelings. I do self-care and I have physical activities. I have ways of managing my stress. So it's probably mild. Sometimes it gets moderate. Sometimes it's severe. I don't usually sleep before. I usually do my mental health first aid is an 8-hour training, and I have a hard time sleeping before my trainings because it's a full day and it exhausts me. And, but I love it. So it gives me like some compassion, satisfaction, right? But at the same time, it doesn't affect my ability to work. My anxious feelings or my lack of sleep doesn't affect my ability to work. However, if it did affect my ability to work, if it affected my ability to carry out my daily activities, then I would say that I would need professional help. And kind of like the short of it is if your feelings and emotions affect your ability to work, I mean, to live, right? To live, to laugh, and to love. So let's think about the 3 L's in how your emotions and how your feelings affect your ability for the living, the loving, and the learning, okay? Mental health check-in, I kind of just added this slide. I'm not sure I love it, but this is it. I feel like it's very easy for us to say, oh, back then it was so good, or back then it wasn't good. And I think sometimes it's important to ask, what is your typical? So what I typically do before the pandemic or before the emergency situation happened? What's my typical today? And what was my typical 3 months ago before everything happened? And how am I varying from my typical, and is my typical healthy? And that means how much stress do we want to give ourselves over the things that we're doing in order to, over the coping mechanisms. Let's say if it's a negative coping mechanism, how much stress we want to put under ourselves, because if you want to think about how much you're varying from your typical, is that okay? So I was eating less and I was on a better diet before the pandemic, but now I'm not. Is that okay? And sometimes it's an amazing gift to be able to gift yourself compassion and not to let your feelings override you, because the reality is we are living in difficult times right now. It doesn't mean that it's going to go on forever. And it doesn't mean I was healthy 3 months ago. That was my typical. Now I'm in an atypical time, and this is how I varied, and it's okay. Or this is how I varied, and it's not okay, and I want to change just this one thing. So kind of just asking yourself, like, where you were, where you are now, and how bad really is it of where I am now, or how positive is it really of where I am now? So let's talk a little bit about creating a self-care plan. I think self-care is hard. And I'll tell you why, because we have a way, you know, if I have a friend or if I have a buddy or if I have my boss or my coworker ask me for something, hey, can you help me out with this? I'd say, sure, I have the time, you know. But if our bodies or our minds are saying to us, can you help us out? We generally put ourselves last. And we're caregivers. That's what we naturally do. And in our role, in your role as caregivers in your organizations, you are going to make sure that you do your role. And it's a very, very hard role. And then when do you have time for yourself, right? But it's important to make time for yourself in order for you to make time for somebody else. Self-care is difficult because you have to initiate it for yourself. Most of the time, you're not going to have people coming to you and say, you know, you really got to take care of yourself. Or if you do, you say, yeah, yeah, yeah. You have to initiate it for yourself. And the other thing about it is that I know that when I get, you know, an expensive dress or a new cell phone, or like I'm thinking like I'd love to get an electric car, you know, I'm going to make sure that I read the care package correctly, that I know how to charge my batteries, and that I know how to wash my dress, or whether I dry clean it or not. They come with very, very packaged, clear instruction labels. I remember when I first brought my older son home from the hospital in Brooklyn, you know, you kind of go up the stairs to your apartment, and I kept on looking back, and I said, there's nobody following me to tell me what I'm doing. Like, this is all on me. There's no care package. Of course, yeah, the care packages, change his diaper and feed him, but there's no other care package. And human beings don't come with a care package. So we know how to help other people with their care packages, but sometimes we have a hard time helping ourselves. So I kind of want you to think about what would be in your care package. What would the label of instructions be? This is what helps me. This is what helps me get by. And some of the things are here is taking a break from watching news stories, or from being, you know, from watching the same things over and over again. I actually just took a trauma-informed care. I'm right now a trauma-informed care trainer. And one of the things that they discuss is that it used to be that people who were news producers, who were video producers, used to have a lot of vicarious trauma because they were watching the news over and over again before it went on to the actual TV. Before it made it onto the nightly news, there were some producers that watched it hundreds of times. So you're watching the same film over and over again. I kind of almost feel like as a society right now, with all the videos and all the sharing, it does work for things that are extremely important. And I'm not going to discredit that. But for your own mental health, seeing the same stories over and over again is not very, very healthy. And it's important for you to know when to take a break. And hearing about every single thing with the pandemic can be upsetting. Taking care of your body. We know that high levels of stress, high levels of cortisol, the hormone cortisol, does have a negative impact on your body. It's proven. You know, with earlier death, with heart disease, with a lot of different things. So taking care of yourself does have the opposite effect. It does give you more stability and more health. Like people that get sick, like on their honeymoon, because they've worked up so hard in order to get to their wedding, and yet here they are sick on their honeymoon. It's the same kind of idea. Stress really, really hurts us, and it really, really harms our body. Good things, taking care of your body helps you, and it restores your body. And giving yourself time to unwind, doing activities that you like, connecting with other people, talking to people that you trust, talking to people about your concerns. You know, human beings, our need for connection is very, very, very strong. And when this pandemic first happened, I know I felt like I needed to find new ways of connecting to people, new ways of finding meaningful dialogue with people. And I reached out to people, like either on Zoom or on the phone, like, hey, my mom's happy. I'm calling her once or twice a day now because, you know, she entertains my kids and, you know, stuff like that. So it's trying to just finding new ways of connecting with people and talking to people that you trust and that you're okay with. So this is a cartoon that sort of summed up my last slide, was that, you know, your desire to be well informed is currently at odds with your desire to be sane. And I think all of us have this like sort of like, you know, information where we sort of want to know everything that's going on, but that it's really, really affecting us. And it's just something, you know, something to kind of think about. All right. So you guys all are lucky. You work in organizations. You're very, 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 you have staff members, you have managers, and you have people around you that help you out. I want to talk to you a little bit about organizational self-care and the part of the organizational self-care. So one part of organizational self-care is to create yourself a buddy system. Okay, so one of the things about self-care is that, of course, that you have to initiate it for yourself. And many times self-care, people confuse self-care with binge watching Netflix. Over the weekend, I was so stressed out that I just spent 6 hours binge watching Netflix. Or eating an entire bag of chips or eating a whole tub of ice cream. That was my self-care. Taking a bath, that was my self-care. Whatever I do, walking in the woods, that was my self-care. However, if we don't mindfully do something, it kind of just gets away from us. Like if I'm in bed for an hour in the morning and my self-care is being able to sit in my bed and look at my phone, it sort of gets away from us if we don't mindfully do it. So binge watching Netflix is okay if that's what you do, as long as you decide beforehand that I am going to mindfully, I'm going to spend the next 2 hours on Netflix in order for me to zone out and in order for me to take care of myself. Then when you're done, it will be done. I remember when I was a kid, well, not really a kid, but my mom, you hear these commercials that Geico saves you, 20, 15%, whatever. And I called Geico. I said, Mom, I'm going to take care of it. She said, I can't waste my time, whatever. So I called Geico, and she was with me, and I did all the talking. And I said, wow, look, you saved $300, a year. I said, what are you going to do with the $300? Like, I would have loved if she would have said, yeah, I'll buy you like a Game Boy or some sort of something, back then, in the olden times where we used to play Tetris, But she said, you're not going to really ever see that money because that $300 is going to go somewhere else. And I feel like it's the same thing with self-care, that unless you say, I'm doing this right now to invest in myself, I'm a stock, I want to invest in myself in order to be able to give to other people, and you mindfully do it, then you will see your returns on that investment. But if you just take the $300 and it goes to something that you don't know what it is, it just kind of gets washed aside and just kind of gets held up with something else. So one of the things about organizational self-care is to share your self-care plan with a buddy. So it could be a coworker if you want to, talk about your work situations. It could be a friend. But the point is that you keep an eye on each other. And the point is that you have, you have somebody else that's saying, hey, are you taking care of yourself? That you set times to check in. And that that if you check in at a certain time and you say, I'm really struggling with something, the person says, what have you done for yourself lately? What have you done to help yourself? And just being there to acknowledge tough situations and to recognize the accomplishments. So a few weeks ago, I had a work colleague who said to me that, I was really struggling, during this time of the pandemic because I'm a little older and I'm in the age and I was really struggling. And she said, I was struggling so much, I didn't even have the strength to reach out. And I said, hey, I said, this is what I do. You can reach out to me. And she said, I didn't have the strength. But something that makes me feel better is knowing that right now I could talk to you about it. So having that sort of system in place, that peer support, that you check in on each other and that you're making sure, okay, and if it's in a work situation, that you monitor each other's workloads and that you're making sure that the person's taking a break, like, hey, did you get a drink today yet? I have a coworker that knows that I have to listen to music. So she's like, if I'm feeling stressed out, she's like, put on your headphones, listen to music. And also that your buddy is able to communicate the basic needs with you and also the limits of your leadership. And that maybe you feel you could help your buddy feel safe speaking up or talking about, the different problems that they have or the different issues. And that you sort of create this system for each other, in each other and for each other in your organization, so that that you're going to be taken care of. It's interesting because a few weeks ago, or maybe 2 weeks ago, I presented on hurricane preparedness and I talked about anxiety. And I talked about also with the continuum and what are the signs and symptoms of anxiety. And one of the questions that came up during the question and answer session, and I'm sure this is not familiar to you at all. One of the questions is how do agencies prepare? And, the people that were on from the different organizations said, you need to have a continuity plan, right? And I know all you guys know what a continuity plan. And then they looked at me and they said, well, you're the mental health expert. what would you say about how organizations plan? And I said that you need to add mental health to your continuity plan. You have to make sure that just as much as you care for your employees, let's not say we're going to care for the community. Let's say we're going to care for our employees in this conversation, right? As much as you care for your employees in this conversation, their physical needs, their safety, their food, make sure they're okay, whether they can come into the office, whether they can come and help. What are you doing as a continuity plan for their mental health? Because reality is mental health is just as important as physical health. And many times it just gets kind of put on the back burner because people don't feel like it's mental health. But in order to be able to keep your productivity, you need to have good mental health in order for you not to be drowning. And along the same lines is something called like an upstream model of prevention. And I don't know if any of you ever heard of this upstream model, but it's kind of like, you know, you're down the river and you saw a bunch of people in the water, and there's one person that's pulling everybody, that's pulling people out of the water. There's a few people, like more people come to help, and they say, I'm gonna help people pull people out of the water. And then one strong, you know, one clever buddy says, hey, why did we never think about doing something further up? Why don't we think about what's making people fall into the water to begin with? So they go upstream and they look and, oh, there's a bridge, or, oh, there's quicksand, or there's a lot of mud, or there's slippery rocks with a lot of moss. Like, this is why people who are falling into the water. And they fix those problems, and then there are less people falling into the water. And I feel like continuity plans is like that. I feel like mental health is like that as well. Before we ourselves drown in the work that we have to do, in the compassion fatigue, you know, Dr. Figley talks about the cost of caring, and there is a very, very great cost of caring, and I don't want to minimize that. But what I want to do is I want to be able to maximize what we could do when we experience that compassion fatigue, what we could do for ourselves and what we should do for ourselves, starting from the upstream, so we don't have to pull ourselves out of the water, and you don't have to pull your coworkers out of the water. All right. So what we're going to do now is I want to show you something that I found extremely helpful, very helpful to me. It's called Self-Care Bingo. And what it is basically is I kind of made one for this group. So I shared already with Jennifer. I could share with Jennifer the link to this so you guys could do it. And I made one just for your group specifically. And I want to really encourage you to, we have a large group here, so it's harder to do with a larger group, but I really want to encourage you to take a look at this and to find something that you do for self-care, and to print it out and to put it on the refrigerator or put it on your shower door, wherever you go. And it's sort of there as a reminder. And I think that sometimes things like taking care of ourselves come last. And when you're feeling those signs of stress and you're feeling signs of distress, you know, okay, let me see what I could do right now. I was kind to myself when I could have been hard on myself, right? Or I could right now take a relaxing bath, or I could take a nap. I could be grateful for something. Those little things will help you get through your day. I want you to think about upstream prevention. I want you to think about not falling into the river to begin with. And as hard as it is, and I know you guys are overworked, and I know that there's a lot going on, but I really, really, really don't want to see you drowning, you know, so to speak. I really want to see you taking care of yourself and making sure that you have the proper tools to be able to get that done. Okay, so here's the information about it. And I'm going to jump back over to my slideshow right now so we can finish up the slideshow. Ooh, okay, perfect. So just a few things to remind yourself that it's not selfish to take breaks. And that the needs of other people are not more important than your own needs, as much as you think that, you know, they are. And also, working all the time doesn't mean you're going to make your best contribution. And like, if you're overworked and you're burdened and you're stressed out, it doesn't necessarily mean that you're going to be patient with that client that you have to be patient with, or you're going to be patient with the people that you manage or your manager. And also, there are other people that could help out in response. As much as we think that we want to believe that we're irreplaceable, there are other people that could do jobs in your response while you go and take your little half-an-hour break, or while you go and take care of yourself. And then I'm just going to make it bigger so you guys can see it a little better. And I just want to give you the local resources. I know that many of you are from all over the state. And one thing I learned about Texas when I moved here is just how large it is. I actually drove through both ends of the state, and I'm proud to say it. And we do offer individual support sessions, so you can have 2 free sessions. And we also offer for parents who are struggling with their kids at home. And you just kind of, here's the information to sign up for the different sessions that we offer. There is a concept called mirror neurons. And a lot of brain scientists believe that this is the beginning of the pathways to empathy in our brain. As managers, as people that work with other people, as parents, as spouses, whatever it is, whatever role that we play in other people's lives, you owe it to yourself, you owe it to the people who kind of follow your lead, who kind of you mirror for and you model your behavior for. Because as managers, if you say, please make sure that your staff is okay, and you make sure that, you want to make sure that your staff is getting the needs that they, getting their needs filled, yet you never take a break and you never talk about self-care, about your own self-care and all that stuff, then it's really sort of just lip service. And it's just something that you have to keep in mind, that you have to be the example for yourself, because your behavior is you're modeling your behavior for other people. And there's sort of like brain science that proves it, with the whole mirror neurons. Like if I see somebody else doing self-care, it's going to remind me like, oh, my self-care action plan means watching TV, or my self-care action plans means making myself something to eat, and therefore I'm going to do it as well. This is the one quote that I want to end up with: is faith is taking the first step, even when you don't see the whole staircase. And I know that during the pandemic and during all the social unrest, which is really, really, really difficult, we're living in a very difficult time. It affects me on a very, very personal level, as well as the pandemic. That we don't see the whole staircase. There's nothing that we wish we could see the future, or that we each had a crystal ball to be able to say, this is what's going to happen in the end, or this is the next emergency that's going to happen. Hopefully there won't be. We don't know what it is. But just taking the first step to help yourself when you can't see the whole staircase, and you can't see yourself being, I have so much work to do, I can't practice self-care. Take the first step, practice self-care. What are you going to do differently today, tonight, or tomorrow based on this session? One thing that you're going to do differently. And just at the end of the slide, there's some local professional referrals. I don't like talking about mental health topics without giving professional referrals. These are all Houston based. And I know that the state of Texas has a lot of great mental health resources. I think we're lucky in that regard. And there's some helpful links for you about self-care. And, the second one is with responders. So I think that all of you are considered responders, and just sort of how to take care of yourself. And now we're up to the question and answer. So I'm going to stop sharing the screen.